speaker. Actually, we have Mr. Nik White, who started off. Nik was leading the South Platte Enhancement Board. Uh, he'll tell you what that's all about. I won't steal anything there. But, that board is the one that provided us or allowed us our grant money that we used to pay for the study on the Gill Trail Restoration. That was a $40,000 grant. And so we couldn't have done that without his support from the board. So again, thank you so much for that. And I'll let you come up here and explain what that board is all about. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. So yeah, my name's Nik. I wear a lot of different hats. My full-time job is I actually teach whitewater kayaking and swiftwater rescue classes with my company Whitewater Workshop. I also, I mean, a lot of it, the stuff I do is whitewater boating. And so I am the Access and Conservation Director for the Colorado Whitewater Association, which is the local Colorado whitewater club in the area. And in that role, I got introduced to the South Platte Enhancement Board. And we kind of have, I'm currently the president on the South Platte Enhancement Board. So the real question is, what is the South Platte Enhancement Board? So let's go to the next one. So if you are not that familiar with the history on the upper South Platte River, here's a couple big bullet points and what that turned into. So way back 1931, Denver Water gets a right of way to build the Two Forks Dam. If you're not familiar with the Two Forks Dam, it would have gone in at the top of Waterton Canyon above Strontia Springs Reservoir and would have flooded everything all the way back to the town of Deckers, maybe even up into Cheeseman Canyon on the main stem, and would have flooded the North Fork all the way back to the town of Buffalo Creek in its largest variation that was proposed. Come to the 1980s, that reservoir is moving forward. The Denver Water is pushing for it. All of the local municipal water providers were pushing for it. They had plans being put up. I can't remember if it was Reclamation or the Army Corps of Engineers, but it was moving forward. And in 1984, though, the Forest Service commissioned a study, a wild and scenic eligibility status study. And as part of that study, they deemed those sections of river as wild and scenic eligible. This set off all sorts of people getting very mad at each other. So the dam builders really wanted to rush building their dam, and on the wild and scenic people really wanted to rush getting wild and scenic status applied there. And there was a lot of headbutting that went on at that point. It eventually came down to in 1991, the EPA vetoed the construction of that largest version of the dam. But then what happens? So there were legal fights, there were more studies, et cetera, and eventually a bunch of stakeholders all came together to the Forest Service and said, hey, we the water providers, we the environmentalists, we all want to work together on this. Let's manage this in a joint way that we're all going to be happy with, that doesn't build a dam right away and doesn't go and do wild and scenic status that might go and give us some restrictions on future ways that we manage the water. Because to be perfectly honest, 80% of Denver's water comes from that river. So there's challenges there. So from 1996 to 2004, there was a big process with the Forest Service and a whole bunch of stakeholders that went and said, hey, we need to make a plan here on how we're going to manage the river that doesn't go into anything that's irrevocable going forward. What might that look like? And it was actually one of the first times ever that there was this collaborative process between all the different stakeholders on how are we going to manage this. A lot of different rivers have had plans move forward based on the collaborative process that started on the South Platte. So if you're familiar on the upper Colorado, They have their Wild and Scenic Alternative Management Plan program. That and many others like it were based on what we did here on the South Platte first. So come to 2004, the Forest Service approved a plan for how they wanted to manage the river that was called the South Platte Protection Plan. And the South Platte Enhancement Board was nominated or created to go and oversee that plan. That plan includes everything from a water flow management plan on, hey, we, you know what, out of Cheeseman, we need at least 70 CFS in the river or all the fish are going to die. That's written into this plan. We need, there are all of these other they're called outstanding and remarkable values, if you're familiar with the Wild and Scenic program. These rivers have all of these amazing wild and scenic or outstanding and remarkable values, and we need to protect them. And the South Platte Enhancement Board is in charge of overseeing and making sure that we protect those things. So go ahead. So this is kind of just a list of everybody who's currently on the board. And I think more important than the names are who they represent. On that list, you'll see people who, so me as the president right now, I'm the whitewater paddling recreation representative. David Nickum is on here as the fishing representative and does an amazing job with it. There are, you'll see Denver Water, Centennial Water, Aurora Water, all of these people, but you'll also see Parks and Rec. You'll see non-motorized rec. You'll see local landowners. All of these different stakeholders all come to the table together, South Platte Enhancement Board, to discuss how should we manage this river in a collaborative way that we're all comfortable moving forward with. So we try to do a really good job about not just everybody bowing down to the water providers, but actually going and putting in some to work together on this. So then the question comes down to, what do we do? The two biggest things that we do, number one is we issue grants to go and protect some of those outstanding and remarkable values that we've identified up there. So we have a grant process that I'll talk a little bit more about later. We also meet monthly with all of those different representatives to go and talk about, hey, how are we managing the river? If there's cool programs or projects that are going on that are going to affect river, how the water quality health or the access and recreation stuff, or honestly even flows and stuff like that for the water providers. We talk about all of that stuff at these monthly meetings. It's a great way just to kind of have good relationships between all of those different stakeholders. So go ahead. So the grant program that we have goes to a whole lot of different things. You can see we've spent almost $1 million, $900,000-ish over the last 20 years for all sorts of different things. And you can kind of see where that money goes to. Excuse me. All of that money that we have came originally from the water providers, to kind of really encourage them to go and be motivated and want to be part of this communal joint management plan. And so we have an endowment of about $1 million that we go and give some money out every year towards projects that we think are going to go and help protect any one of these ORVs in the area. So a couple of examples, you'll see the big one tonight is the Upper Gill Trail restoration stuff. But we also have done, we donated money for the dam removal at the bottom of 11 Mile Canyon that's just finished this year. The stairs that are at Deckers, the stone stairs there, we donated money for that. We also paid for the first couple of years actually, that the Forest Service, when COVID hit, when recreation went through the roof in this area, Forest Service came to us and we're like, we need rangers on the ground telling people, hey, don't start fires, hey, don't leave trash, hey, don't do these terrible things. So we paid for the ranger program for the first couple of years. So that's just a couple examples. there's a whole lot others. I think it said we've done like over 48 grants over the past 20 years or so. Everything from putting new bathrooms in at the Buffalo Creek trailhead to studies on, I think the weirdest one I think was they did a really cool study on using mushrooms to go and biodegrade chopped down tree material. Like if they did some forest thinning, can we use mushrooms to go and make that biodegrade faster? So fascinating stuff. Anything related to control or excuse me, protecting this watershed and the things that we all find important. So big key thing for me is that we're accepting grant applications. We do this once a year. So if you guys have a project that you want some funding for, we have money and we love to give it out for this type of stuff, including the Gill Trail. But if you guys have other projects that are going out that you need some funding for, please put in an application. We'd love, and honestly, we love just going out and seeing the stuff after it goes in and being like, yeah, this is awesome. Let's bring out Denver water. Let's bring out Aurora water and let them see the awesome things that are going in here. So that's all I had. Did anybody have any questions for me? Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Well, let's introduce Bill Mangle. He's from ERO Resources, and his company did the study. First of all, the mapping of the entire Gill Trail and social trails that came off of that, and they are put out a draft report at the end of last year. Got comments coming into it now, and they're finalizing that report, which says let's do a project within the canyon of the fixes that are recommended there. And so that'll be well, not the first effort. The first effort is to get the Forest Service to go in there and do a NEPA study in that canyon for what can be done in there and how it can be done. And once that gets approved, then we could go put boots on the ground and start changing, fixing some of that trail in there. So without further ado,
Thanks, Scott. And that's pretty much the presentation. So we're done. Yeah, again, I'm Bill Mangle. I'm a natural resource planner with ERO Resources. We're a local environmental and planning consulting firm. Really I focus on public lands planning and this interface of natural resource protection and recreation management. So we can go to the next slide. So really the key partners besides you folks, the Pike National Forest South Platte Ranger District, they've been really supportive in any way they can to help this move forward. Denver Water, Rocky Mountain Field Institute, they're a Colorado Springs based nonprofit who really does a lot of boots on the ground work with restoration and stewardship. And then the consultant team is our team at ERO Resources and Priscilla Marbaker with Tapas Associates. We were able to talk to you together about this time last year, and Priscilla couldn't make it this time. And lastly, none of this could happen without the funding. And so the initial study was funded by a very generous grant from Denver Water through their watershed protection program. I probably didn't get that name right, but Denver Water funded the first phase of the study, and then South Platte Enhancement Board really kind of helped move it forward to get to this point where we're pretty darn close to having a final report on the table. So we'll keep moving here. So the overall objectives of this study and what we want to do is, improve the condition and sustainability of the Gill Trail and the river access, and identify unsustainable social routes and close them, improve safety, signage, and wayfinding in the canyon, protect and improve the fishery of the 4-mile stretch of the South Platte River through Cheeseman Canyon. That's really the driving thing here. and then, maintain opportunities and balance for some of the different user groups in the canyon, and manage for both the front country accessibility from the trailheads and the unique backcountry experiences for all visitors. And I guess it goes without saying, have you all had the pleasure of enjoying Cheeseman Canyon and how special it is, and how, especially when you get way back in there, it is a unique and amazing experience. And that really touches on some of our goals as we kind of assess it and get into recommendations. So go ahead. So, it's a very steep canyon with, highly erodible DG soils, and the native soil is already has sparse vegetation. And so it doesn't take much to really upset what's going on in there. And then you have the Hayman fire burn off the kind of the top of the scalp up there, and then the big dome rocks, and it makes for a very unstable situation. But we also have this beautiful river with gold medal trout waters, and so that's a high value as well as an important watershed, both for the ecosystem and for the downstream drinking water sources. The area supports habitat for 3 threatened species. The Mexican spotted owl has critical habitat in the area. The Pawnee montane skipper, it's this little butterfly that likes the blue grama under the ponderosas in that part of the world. And then the Preble's meadow jumping mouse, which has habitat in the riparian habitat along the stream banks and some of the side channels. So it's pretty important. And also there's bighorn sheep and birds and raptors and all sorts of cool stuff. You've seen it. 2 trailheads, access points, the main trailhead down by Deckers, a higher trailhead up by Cheeseman Reservoir. Heavy use, or relatively heavy use, of the Gill Trail. It's, for being such a remote area, there's a lot of activity there, almost 7 days a week. A lot of anglers, and as well as hikers. It's it's been discovered as a cool place to go. And so all the above has led to a very extensive system of non-system trails. So the Gill Trail is the singular Forest Service designated trail, some of which follows historic wagon road routes, and then getting down to the river and back out is a whole mess of social trails, which we'll touch on. The social trails, they vary in condition, frequency of use. There's a lot of them. Go ahead. So one key concept going into this assessment is we kind of think about, in our study, we think about the canyon in these really 3 distinct zones. So the lower canyon, closest to the trailhead, heaviest use. Most people, particularly the casual visitors, don't make it that much farther than here. And whereas, some people explore in from the other side, the trailhead by Cheeseman Canyon, get down the steep switchbacks and stairs and down below the dam. And those are kind of our heavy areas. And then I think you all know, back in this inner canyon is what's, in my opinion, really special. And that has much less use and has much more of a wild backcountry feel to it. Again, which I think is what makes it special. Say that again. And so I want to say this now because this colors how we try to think about some of our management recommendations moving forward. Go ahead. But first we had to figure out what's out there. So with the first round of funding from Denver Water, we had pretty intensive field work, 26 person days, to map the condition of not only the Gill Trail, but all of the social trails extending off of the Gill Trail, and taking data every 200 feet and field measurements. So it was a lot of work. And we had, this is the rating system for each segment. this is green, even though it looks yellow. From green to 4 is red to severe. You know, the severe is like it's actually a safety issue, a major issue right now. Whereas, you know, we have kind of varying degrees of trails, and you see this throughout the Front Range, throughout Colorado. And then we also collect data on trail structures, retaining walls, switchbacks, steps, all that type of stuff, trail junctions, vegetation, soil types, and some of the supporting information to understand what's going on. Go ahead. This is just sort of a snapshot of what the data maps look like coming out of this, where you have the Gill Trail is the solid line, the social trails are the dotted lines indicating their condition. So, you know, you have, you know, most of the Gill Trail is shades of green and yellow, and then gets into the reds and blacks in a few places. You know, back here, kind of closer to Cheeseman Canyon, I think a lot of you know this area is kind of a mess. Lots of reds and blacks, particularly on the social trails. So this is just a snapshot. I actually have some maps, assessment maps, if you'd like to print it out, if you'd like to look at them more closely. Oh, go ahead. So this is the findings. First of all, 11.3 miles of social trails in a 4.5, 5 mile canyon. So there are more social trails and designated trails in this erosive canyon. And so that really underscores the magnitude of the issue here. And so I guess the good news is 43% of the social trails are in good and a relatively stable condition. Another third is in this moderate condition. And then the last quarter is really a mess. And so this gives us a sense of what we're working with. This is for the whole canyon. Go ahead. So who was in the canyon last July 31st? So you know the story. Massive storm rolls over in the early afternoon. Yeah, okay. 4 o'clock. So massive storm rolls over at 4 o'clock. You know, right when you maybe should be heading home, but yeah, maybe I'll push it a little bit. And so you know, it hits the upper burn slopes, it hits the dome rock, and wherever there's a channel, it gushes down. And so, you know, we were nearing the end of our field assessment when this happened. And it's like, oh geez, did this just wash away a year's worth of work? And you know, you've probably seen this. This is kind of closer to the trailhead. This was coming from the south side, a big, and initially it was, you know, more than halfway into the river of this just big sediment flow. And then this is deeper into the canyon. This is a big side channel that comes from the north. And you know, this was the area. It's kind of a nice picnic spot, nice area to have lunch, and completely undercut. This is, you know, this cut bank on the side channel is probably about 5 feet right here, and then another flow going out into the river. Those are the two big ones, and then hundreds and hundreds of these types of things where it just ran down the side of the canyon. And so, well, you can go to the next slide. You know, this is a picture about 2 weeks later. So the river is starting to take it back, but shows, first of all, sediment deposition into the river. And then some of the damage to the trails. This level of damage was pretty typical. And then this is one of the kind of quasi social trails that was constructed about 20 years ago. The yellow line is where the trail was. This was a nice retaining wall. And this is about a 3-foot deep trench behind the wall. And so, it's a lot of damage, a lot of dramatic damage, but, it's a couple things is that most of the damage to the Gill Trail itself was moderately repairable. It still is moderately repairable. And we found that it didn't change the overall trail condition assessments. Guess what? The stuff that was bad is just as bad or worse. But the stuff that was good performed pretty well. So it didn't change, as dramatic of an event as that was, it didn't change the overall findings of this assessment as we move forward. So with that validation, we were able to sort of push through to the end. So go ahead. So what was the end? Part of that, after all that field work, it was coming up with a strategy to improve these issues in Cheeseman Canyon and honor the values that really make it special. And so the overall strategy is to direct and manage appropriate visitor access while closing and stabilizing unsustainable routes in the canyon. That happens with trail system and river access design. People want to go to the river, and so we need to make it, make good, sustainable ways for that to happen. Stabilization of the existing trails, construction of some new designated access trails, closure of the non-suitable social trails, introducing fencing to direct visitors in some area, more informational and directional signage, and some passive management techniques that I'll touch on in a few minutes. So go ahead. So the management philosophy here, this gets to the different zones and the character of the canyon, is first of all, starting with minimum tool principle. What that means is that in this type of work, in this type of setting, you want to try to use the least intensive tool to solve the problem that you're trying to solve. The problem there is, all the work that was done 20, 25 years ago to solve these same problems, I can see how they honored the minimum tool principle, but unfortunately, those tools were too minimal and didn't stand the test of time. So we've learned by looking at the condition and looking at the condition of what was attempted 25 years ago, more like 22 years ago, that we need to, in a lot of places, ratchet up to that next level of intensity with some of the tools. Other philosophies, we want to physically direct visitors to sustainable planned access to where they want to be. And so, people are, you manage people and give people the right route to where they want to go, and it really cuts down on people going where you don't want them to go. And this third one's really important. I think it's a combination of really at the entrance to the canyon, both through signage and some of the other management controls, really establish this ethic of stewardship to people as they visit. So they understand that this place is important, this place is special, and there's some ground rules about my visit. And so not everyone's going to honor that, but a lot of people do once they kind of get that sense, that ethic, that people care about this place and we need to honor that. Part of that is also communicating the unique features and ethics and educating people how to responsibly access the river. So back to our management zones. This is where in the lower canyon, again, most of our use, most of our intensive use closest to the trailhead, that's where we're also going to have more intensive solutions. It's going to be in this, it bothers me. I don't I don't love going to that next level of intensity with solutions. But I think as you know, close to the trailhead, it's necessary again to establish that control and establish that ethic. So, you know, closest to the trailhead, that's where you would have more designated trails, more larger fences to really keep people where they're supposed to be for the first quarter mile, more signage directing and telling the story, and that type of thing. Whereas then when you get into the inner canyon, you know, your use drops off by probably 3/4. Then we can go to the more passive techniques, you know, less signage, less fencing or no fencing, and more subtle things that we like to see in the backcountry. And so that's the idea. And then in the upper canyon on the west side, kind of a mix of those two, kind of appropriate to the situation. So go ahead. And then with each area being thoughtful about planned access design. And so, you know, thinking about how people are coming in, whether it's, you know, if you're fishing or if you're out on a hike or you're out with your kids or whatever, you want to get to the river. And so thinking, you know, thinking about these kind of logical routes getting in. So you're coming in, you want to get to the river, you have access along the river, and you want to get out. And then the Gill Trail higher on the slope is your way back. And so planning the different sections to include this type of sequence. So you're giving the people what they want so they don't create it on their own. So a little bit more on these implementation guidelines. I'll touch on those. Go ahead. So improvements to the trails themselves. First of all, routine maintenance. And that's something that, you know, it's Forest Service and Denver water property. But, you know, I think all sorts of partners need to, you know, continue to be involved in helping with just the routine maintenance. Trail structures, a lot of work. You know, these are some of Priscilla's renderings around some of the junctions and the retaining walls that need to happen in there. Identifying a few spots for designated water access for the non-anglers so that they can do what they want to do, because you know they want to, without doing too much environmental damage and not getting in the way of some of the best fishing holes. And then some places where a reroute of the existing trails are necessary just to make it more sustainable and make it work. Go ahead. Junctions. Here's one of the old signs from 20 years ago. A new sign program to make it clear at all the junctions where folks need to go, and planning the system so we minimize the number of those junctions. You know, people often, when they're confused, that's also when they go where they're not supposed to be. And the types of signage, you know, informational and, you know, telling the story of the canyon and the stewardship ethic, regulatory signs, directional signs, trailhead this way, river that way, and resource protection where that's necessary. So go ahead. So, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'll tell me if I'm keeping with the beat. Social trail closures, there's a lot of work to do here. And in these soils, it's challenging, but it's possible. And so a couple of the guidelines here is you kind of pick an area and solve for the whole access, not just a single trail. And so be really strategic about it and construct or improve the desired access route at the same time you close something. There's, you know, if you close something that people use and you don't give them a place to go, they're gonna go right back on the just closed. And so these things, it needs to be this kind of this dance of like doing these kind of like in sequence, pick an area, solve it, pick an area, solve it, pick an area, solve it. Active trail closures, that is something where kind of like this photo, it has fencing, it's really obliterated and probably has signs, whereas passive trail closures is more of what has been tried before and we like to see in the backcountry where you pull some down trees over something and just let it be. We want to use all tools in this area. Do you have a question back there? Yeah, you're absolutely right. If people, yeah, I'm with you. My first instinct is like, no signs, no signs, no signs, but we need to be strategic about communicating why, and then giving people the best opportunity to do the right thing. So up on this side for a little bit. Go to the next slide. Also, okay, so fencing strategies. In that kind of closer to the trailhead front country area, we want to have more established fencing to direct people where they're supposed to go and establish the ethic that this is a managed place that people care about. That's another thing. At first, I was personally really resistant to this because you don't want to put a bunch of clutter in there, but that's where you kind of do it. You start heavy and lighten up the farther back you go in. And so, and in those soils on those slopes, constructing any sort of fence will not be easy. And so that's why we're starting with a buck and rail type system, which in itself won't be easy. So it would be used sparingly. And these couple of these pictures aren't great, but I think it's actually a great solution. Those are photos from Jefferson County Open Space, and it's a smooth wire 2-strand with just minimal posts, and you can't see it. Love it, but it's strong enough. It's it's big enough where it's going to keep you from going there, but it's subtle enough where you really can't see it. And so I really like this solution. And then another solution, this is actually a picture from Iceland of, I've seen studies of where it actually works to have something that's just low to the ground. And, if someone has to do this, they already know they're in the wrong spot. And so that's even less visually intrusive. Something like this could be pretty, would work pretty well in those soils, but would need to be maintained. So use of these solutions is also needs to be strategic and know what your goals are. But, really you introducing this tool to the canyon. And I'll say it again, my first instinct was like, no, I don't want to put a bunch of crap in the canyon. But I think we're there. I think we need to do it and do it strategically and, make sure that we're using the right solution for the right problem. Go ahead. So how do we start? We've identified what we call a pilot project. And, in that highest concentration area to really test out these methods in an area that's more accessible, easier to monitor, easy to manage and maintain, and just pick a spot and let's do it and see what works, see what doesn't. Some of the stuff won't work, and we'll learn from that. But some of the stuff will then be tools that we could apply elsewhere in the canyon as we move forward. And so this pilot area, and next slide is a map. It's the half-mile of the Gill Trail, and includes about 1.5 miles of either new or refurbished trail to provide better river access. And then 7/10 of a mile of social trail closures. Go to the next one. So that's shown here. This is Wigwam, the kiosk sign up at the top of the map. I think y'all know this area. Gill Trail is the heavy orange line. So the lighter yellow trails would be designated either kind of refurbished out of existing social trails or in some cases new trails, provide river access. Whereas the red dashed would be social trail closures. And in this vicinity, this would be more intensive, active trail closures to really get people going to where we want them to be. Go ahead. So what are the overall next steps? There's a lot of them. I wish I could say that this was done, but this is just the beginning, folks. And so it'll take a lot of work and a lot of partners to get a lot of this done, starting with the pilot project. Funding. That's something that, you know, we'll continue to be diligent about and leveraging the existing partners and bringing partners. So NEPA evaluation. Forest Service requires that they do an environmental evaluation of any of the work on the forest. It's good practice to make sure that, you know, they look at all the issues, they're conscious of the endangered species that are present, they're conscious of the historical and cultural resources that are present, and go through their process. Forest Service staff, they believe that this will be a relatively light NEPA evaluation, but they don't really know until they get into it. And then each section, whether it's the pilot or moving forward, requires some final design and really kind of and specifications, and then construction. Construction can be a professional trail contractor. It could be a nonprofit group like Rocky Mountain Field Institute, supplemented by volunteers like yourselves and your friends and other partners. Monitoring and evaluation to make sure that what we try to do is working, and then rinse and repeat. Keep moving up the canyon. This worked, let's do it again. This didn't work, we're not going to try that. And so it'll be an ongoing process. So go ahead. Our current, as we finish up the report, what our team is currently working on is further refining the trail data so we can try to put some cost numbers to it for future grant applications. Preliminarily, we think that the pilot project, depending on who does it and when, if it's a, you know, a nonprofit stewardship group ranging to a professional trail contractor, you're in the $30,000 to $65,000 range for that pilot project, which is, again, it's about 1.5 miles of trail improvements, almost 1 mile of trail closures, and some of the fencing and some of the signage and all that stuff. NEPA compliance, if the U.S. Forest Service can do it in-house with their staff, there's not a cost there, but it takes a lot of time. If they want either partial or full contractor assistance with the NEPA studies, sometimes that's doing the archaeological surveys, sometimes it's doing the whole thing. You know, that can be 30 to 50,000 for the level of NEPA that we think might be required here. And then the other canyon segments, that'll be probably pilot project continuing up the canyon, but it will become less intensive. So let's not get too freaked out. Pilot area is 9% of the Gill Trail, but it's the most intensive treatment that we would see in the canyon. And so this sort of per mile cost should go down dramatically as we go into the canyon. And I'm looking forward to having some better numbers on that shortly. And so what we can do is use that to work with the Forest Service, work with Rocky Mountain Field Institute, work with Denver Water, work with other partners, and shake the trees and find the grant funding and continue to move this stuff forward. What I do know is that Forest Service is very interested in this. Denver Water is very interested in this. And there is a lot of, I think, interest and momentum to keep this moving forward. And so, but it'll take time. So, yep. The NEPA would not have to be done on the Denver waterland. They may have some internal requirements. Oftentimes it's best to do it together anyway, because an activity on the Forest Service might trigger having to look at it at some of the potential resource impacts on the Denver water property. Take, for example, the cultural or archaeological resources. The state historic preservation office has their own rules around that and what they consider a connected action. So remember, NEPA, which 30 years ago kept this from all being underwater, now is our first step to be able to fix it. So it's
So, stuff that every guidance or whatever you want to call it, or we're gonna at this point leave what
no, that's in pretty good shape. It was just done this last season. And so yeah, you'd want to have the consistent signage, the consistent education, the same, like kind of establishing that stewardship ethic from the trailhead. But yeah, the good news is that those switchbacks above the west parking lot were just redone. And then that part going across the top is just minor touch-ups. There's not a whole lot that needs to happen there until you drop into the canyon below the dam, and then it gets really interesting. So. Yeah. Yeah, we were afraid that that would happen, but we discovered that it did not happen. But we did have to do, some of our field work this past fall was kind of reassessing some things and touching up the maps and the data. Good question. Yeah.
So right now the pilot project is all at that lower canyon, not even that far up lower canyon. To identify areas that were severely impacted by the canyon. Is there a separate process to handle those things that needed immediate safety concerns?
That's a really good question. So I think a lot of you know that area deep in the canyon that is just nasty. And it's actually right around the corner from this picture. Yeah, some of those things would be, you'd probably have some spot projects. And in our report, we actually kind of identify priorities by segment. And so, you would probably ideally concurrent with the pilot project, knock out some of those severe issues that are deeper into the canyon. I would hope that it's, the Forest Service approval, but then partners being able to do it that way. So
just to make a point, back in September, we were allowed to go in by the Forest Service using guidance from HOMA, the Colorado Mountain Biking Association, and their leadership that new trail design. And we went from the lower parking lot all the way up to, I think, Denver Water, or it was at just the border. Denver water rate. Okay, so we didn't go all the way up, but we did the whole trail to get the safety uh, issues taken care of.
Yeah, one of those things is that you can maintain an existing trail without NEPA. But when you start doing new stuff, when you start obliterating trails and you're starting to kind of mess with the trails that were never supposed to be trails, that gets it to a whole other level. And so the Forest Service just has to follow their regulations. Good question, and to my knowledge, no. I, but that, yeah, they're getting the sediment. They're the first ones. Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. So,
Name sections in a past, done a great job of naming sections, but lay people know where we are in relation to another section, and so if we're trying to meet up with people or safety thing, like I got lost in XYZ section, sort of. I'm not.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I don't know what the answer is, but I think that's a good idea to have something that's first of all relevant to the fishery, but also is intuitive to visitors and, you know, have, whatever your landmarks and your sections are. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I could see at some of those critical junctions of like trailhead that way, 2 miles, whatever. Other questions? I think that was my last slide. So,
And you have a map of where the fencing is so fencing good.
we've identified in the pilot area where we think the fencing should go. For example, it's like, okay, the first 250 linear feet going in from the sign and that type of thing. To your other question, how do you close the social trails? It's all these tools. And so, in the more kind of intense areas, it is some sort of fence. And, then also kind of obliterating and covering up the existing social trail, making sure that it doesn't continue to erode. And then maybe even, in these soils, do some of the erosion control matting that's made out of straw. And so that both tries to help with revegetation, which will be really hard here. And also is that signal to people of like, you're not supposed to be here. As we get deeper into the canyon, that gets to that sort of passive closure, which is more of the like, I mean, actually, you could put a youth corps to work for a week pulling down trees down off the hillside and just blocking stuff, kind of more of that passive, naturalistic approach, which I like better, but I also know it doesn't work in more of the intensive areas. Good question. Other questions? Yeah, well, there's a question in Wigwam about approaching them about assisting with funding and implementation. So,
Well, there's change. It's about, well,
Yeah, thank you. Other questions? I think my last slide was just the thank you, so thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Just a question, when do we expect to see, final report?
In March.
March? Okay, right around the corner. Great. So again, thank you, everybody, and, I know a lot of you have, sent us, your name and your email address to help the Cheeseman Canyon, help the Gill Trail. We had, nearly 400 people sign up as a volunteer to go into that canyon and help when we asked for it. We got a bunch of people this past fall that, went in there and per the direction of, Comba, helped us restore that trail to a safe passage condition, the main trail, not anything down on the social trail. So, we'll be, putting up on that list again once we get approval to start, working on the pilot project and, moving forward. So, again, thank you very much. This is, something that, 22 years ago that, the Cutthroat chapter, did as a multi-year project from late 99 through early 2004, I think it was, where we went in there as a chapter, all the volunteer work. And, first of all, made the trail passable. Even connected the, trail from the end of the, Forest Service boundary all the way up to the, upper parking lot. So that was done at that time too. A lot of that stuff, as Bill said, was tried to be minimal, of keeping people on the trail. And after 22 years, we've seen Mother Nature and the increase, usage in the canyon that it's time to go back in there and, let's, get it fixed. And, we'll be, once it's done, it looks like it's on a yearly basis to go in there and keep it passable and, make it the special place that, we really think it is. It's our home water for the chapter, so that's why we think it's really special, and we want to do whatever we can for that. So again, thank you for your support, your donations to the chapter, go to this effort, as well as go to youth education and other conservation projects. But we're looking that this is going to be our major, focus for the next few years at least. All right. With that, I will, turn it over to Jerry for the raffle prize winners. Let Bill pick the first ticket there.